Hello, I'm Sandra Barker and welcome back to my book Look in the Shadows. This is chapter 8 called The First Revelation. It's not very often that you feel that God specifically speaks to you or reveals something to you, particularly when you're in the time of inaction, when you're in the wilderness. And times of wilderness can last an incredibly long time. For me, it was close to 30 years. But the questions that my daughter were asking inspired me to venture further into the scriptures for myself, as the Sunday sermons were not giving me the information that I needed. Sometimes I would choose certain texts or books such as the Gospels, and other times I would just open up anywhere and start reading. Other times I searched specific topics and jotted down notes as I was reading. But there was a common element that I was reading every time I searched the scriptures, and that was, go and help the poor. Other themes kept cropping up as well, such as laying down your life for Christ, living a life of sacrifice. But by far the most common theme was with regard to helping people who were less fortunate. Each time I would go to church, the message that was preached seemed to have a very different bent. The main theme seemed to be, God is going to prosper you and fulfill your dreams. There was a very strong message on faith, but the outworking of that faith was about self-fulfillment. It was about God giving us our best life, about God fulfilling our dreams, about God making our businesses successful. Now, I'm not saying that message is not in the scriptures or that it's wrong. There are certainly scriptures that would say words to that effect. But what I'm talking about is the degree of emphasis that's given to it. And the degree of emphasis that I perceived when I was reading the scriptures was about laying down one's life in the service of others. It was about personal sacrifice. It was about dying to self. The message that I kept getting from the scriptures became so repetitive that it actually started to annoy me. I decided one day that I would not read any more of the New Testament. Instead, I would focus on the Old Testament because I wanted to get another message. I was laying on my bed one day and specifically opened up in the Old Testament at a random place. I can't remember the exact place anymore, and I probably could never find it if I tried. But it said the same thing as what I was getting in the New Testament. Go and help the poor. I distinctly at the time remember feeling totally floored. I said to God, "Okay, I get it." I slammed the Bible shut and put it aside. This had been going on for about 6 months, and frankly, I'd had enough. But what I did do was begin a process of searching for something that I could do to help other people. My daughter was working in a pharmacy at the time, and she had contact with a lot of elderly people, as she would go out and deliver their various medications to them. There was one old lady in particular who was in a nursing home. I'd been sharing my revelations with my daughter, and we decided to start visiting this lady once a week. She was a Christian woman, and so it seemed a good place to start. It went along quite nicely for a while, and I often thought about what a meaningless existence it must be for people in nursing homes. The gates are always locked. They can't go out. They can't do anything. There's nothing in their life to fulfill them. So I asked the old lady if she would like to have a ministry in praying for other people. I thought that it would give her a purpose in life, something to take an interest in. Well, this obviously did not hit a chord with her. We received a message a little while later through another person telling us not to come back. So I started to look for something else to express my newly received revelation. I'd had some involvement in the past years with sponsoring a couple of children over in Uganda through the work of Irene Gleason. She's a woman who I greatly admired. She had gone out alone to help orphaned children in Africa. The organisation that she had started became quite large and ministered in the end, I think, to some 20,000 children or more. I decided that I would write to them and ask them to see if there was anything I could do to assist in their work. I looked up their contact details on the internet and sent off an email. But I never did receive a reply. So, the next thing that I had a look at was the work that our church was doing over in Aceh. That's in the western part of Indonesia. This was after the tsunami had devastated that region. They were sending up teams into the area to do rebuilding of the lost facilities. There was a particular woman in the church who was a nurse, and she was heavily involved in this program. So I approached her one Sunday and asked her about this ministry to see if I could have some involvement. Well, the response that I received greatly shocked me. She looked at me in a rather disdainful way and said that I should go away and pray about it first. This totally floored me. Firstly, on the fact that she assumed that I had not prayed about it, and that secondly, how can I pray about something if I don't know anything about it? I was merely asking for information so that I could give it further consideration. She made me feel like an outsider, that I was not one of them, that I wasn't good enough to be part of their program, and what right did I have to be involved? Suffice to say, I actually didn't pray about it and promptly crossed it off my list of possible ministries. I don't think I would ever want to work with someone who had an attitude like that. My next idea was to do something in terms of prison ministry. I started making inquiries and managed to speak to a woman who was involved in this type of ministry. I found out that in order to do this sort of thing in Australia, I had to do a special training program called The Road to Emmaus. I looked it up on the internet, but no courses were available in the next 12 months. The type of program that it was didn't really appeal to me, and so I decided to cross it off my list as well. Next, I also reconsidered the idea of going back to helping the homeless. I'd tried to get involved with this many years ago in my early 20s, and I'd gone to a homeless shelter to have a look. But it was something that didn't feel particularly comfortable with me at the time. ministering to all those old men with alcoholic problems and whatever just somehow didn't strike a chord with me, and I didn't feel to go back and pursue that option. So I also crossed it off my list. My page of possible options about helping people less fortunate was now empty. Everything that I had tried to do had totally failed. Then, one day, we decided to go to a Saturday evening service because we had a number of commitments to attend to on the Sunday. The sermon was being preached by one of the assistant pastors. During the course of his message, he said that Jesus had died on the cross so that we could be wealthy. For me, this was the last straw. I felt so angry that I wanted to stand up and yell abuse at the pastor. What he spoke about was worlds apart from the message that I was getting from the scriptures. I told my husband that I could not attend this church anymore, because if I did, I would end up causing him great embarrassment, because I would surely stand up and yell abuse at the pastor. I would do this if I would hear a message like that again. But my husband was greatly opposed to making such a move. He liked the church and the strong message on faith. In addition to that, we had invested the past 25 years of our life into the church. We'd been involved in the building program. He had been the prayer director of the building program for about 10 years, and he didn't want to give up that role. But I never did go back to that church again. No one ever noticed that I had gone. No one ever called to ask why I was not in church. I was now in an even bigger wilderness, with no church to attend, and I seemed to be heading in a very different direction to my husband. It was like I was rowing in a different direction. But I felt I had to continue rowing with determination, even though the gulf between myself and where my husband was at seemed to grow wider the longer that I rowed. What God had laid on my heart was not going to go away. So where to from here? There were many more changes that were going to come. I had no idea what I had begun. I'll see you in the next chapter to talk about what happened next. Bye for now.